Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the universe changed forever. The bridge of the UHS Freedom's Edge hummed quietly as it moved through the dark space between stars. Jake had been exploring this sector for 3 months, mapping new systems and looking for signs of life. It was peaceful work, the kind he liked after 20 years of military service. "Captain, we're getting something strange," called out Communications Officer Linda Hayes from her station. Her voice had that edge it got when something wasn't right. "It's not from Earth or any of our colonies." Jake set down his coffee and walked over to her console. The screen showed waves of data flowing in patterns he had never seen before. "What is it? Some kind of broadcast signal. It's coming from everywhere at once, like someone is sending it to the whole galaxy." Linda's fingers danced over her controls, trying to make sense of the information. "And Captain, it's in multiple languages, some I've never heard before." Jake felt his heart beat faster. First contact with alien life was something every explorer dreamed of, but also feared. "Can you translate any of it?" "The computer's working on it now. Give me a minute." Linda's screen filled with symbols and sounds that seemed to shift and change as the translation program tried to make sense of them. Lieutenant Kevin Smith, the ship's science officer, came over to look at the data. "Captain, this signal is incredibly powerful. Whoever sent this has technology far beyond ours. It's in the range. ... This is reaching across the entire galaxy." Jake nodded slowly. If aliens were making contact, he wanted to be ready. "Red, get the whole crew to stations. Send a message back. To Earth Command, they need to know about this." As the crew hurried to their positions, Linda suddenly looked up from her console. Her face had gone pale. "Captain, I've got a translation. You're not going to like this." Jake leaned over her shoulder to read the screen. The words were simple, but they hit him like a punch to the stomach. "Help us. Please, anyone who can hear this message, help us. We are the Cathara people of the Endara system. Our world is under attack. They came from the dark between stars, ships like metal storms, weapons that burn everything they touch. We have never known war, do not have soldiers or weapons to fight them. Our cities are burning. Our children are dying. They call themselves the hegemony, and they say we are weak and do not deserve to live. We tried to surrender, but they do not want surrender. They want us gone forever. This message goes out to all who might hear. Please, if there is anyone out there who believes that peace should be protected, help us. We are running out of time."
Ow.
Bridge went quiet. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. He read the message again, then looked around at his crew. Every face showed the same thing, anger building like a storm. "How far away are they?" Jake asked. Kevin checked his instruments. "The Endara system. It's about 40 light years from here. With our fastest ships, it would take months to get there." "Captain," Linda said, her voice shaking slightly. "There's more to the message. They're broadcasting constantly, updating their situation. The attacks are getting worse." Jake watched as new text appeared on the screen. Reports of cities falling, families separated, people hiding in caves and ruins while alien ships hunted them from above. The Cathara kept asking for help, but also kept saying they understood if no one came. They didn't expect rescue. They just wanted someone to know they had existed. "Sir," said Red Williams, the ship's pilot, "we need to do something." Jake looked at his crew. These weren't soldiers anymore. They were explorers and scientists, but the look in their eyes was something he recognized from his war days. They were getting ready to fight. "Send this message back to Earth immediately," Jake ordered. "Market priority 1, Admiral's eyes only. Include everything we've translated so far." He paused, thinking, and sent a message to the Cathara.
"Tell
them someone heard their call." Linda's hands moved quickly over her controls. "What should I tell them?" "Tell them help is coming." Over the next few hours, more messages came in from the Cathara. The situation was getting worse. The hegemony wasn't just attacking military targets. They were burning schools, hospitals, farms. They seemed to enjoy causing fear and pain, but something else was happening too. The ship's long-range sensors were picking up responses to the IQs, Kithara message from all over the galaxy. Dozens of different alien species were receiving the distress call. Kevin had been monitoring the responses. Captain, you need to see this. Jake looked at the data Kevin had collected. Hundreds of alien civilizations had received the Kithara message. Some sent back diplomatic responses, polite but distant. Others offered prayers or good wishes. A few promised to bring the matter up in their governments or councils, but no one offered to actually help. They're all just watching, Kevin said, his voice full of disbelief. All these advanced civilizations, and they're treating this like it's not their problem. Linda looked up from her station. I'm monitoring communications from several species. They're talking about the hegemony. Apparently this isn't the first time they've done something like this. The hegemony is some kind of alliance of predator species that takes over planets and enslaves or destroys the people living there. And everyone just lets them do it, asked Red. It seems that way. The other species are afraid of them, or they think it's too expensive to fight them, or they say it's not their responsibility. Jake felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach. In all his years of military service, he had never backed down from bullies. The idea that an entire galaxy of civilizations would just watch while peaceful people were slaughtered made him sick. Captain, Linda said suddenly. We're getting a response from Earth. Admiral Kate Sullivan's face appeared on the main screen. Her expression was grim but determined. Captain Morrison, we've received your message and we're monitoring the situation. How fast can you get to Earth? About 2 weeks at maximum burn. Admiral, do it. We're calling an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Every nation, every colony, every ship we have. Sullivan's eyes were hard as steel. Captain, I want you to understand something. This message from the Kithara has been received by thousands of species across the galaxy. As far as we can tell, we're the only ones actually doing anything about it. Jake wasn't surprised. Humans had always been different. What are your orders, Admiral? Get back to Earth as fast as you can. We're going to need every ship, every soldier, every resource we have. Sullivan leaned forward. Jake, we're about to show the galaxy what happens when you mess with innocent people and humans find out about it. The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. Around him, his crew was already preparing for the journey home. But Jake wasn't thinking about Earth. He was thinking about the Kithara, huddled in their ruins, still sending out messages asking for help. They didn't expect to receive. They had no idea that their message had reached the one species in the galaxy that couldn't ignore a cry for help. The one species that had evolved on a world so dangerous that protecting others had become as natural as breathing. The call had gone out to all the civilized species of the galaxy, but it had reached Deathworlders. And Deathworlders took that kind of thing personally. Earth had never moved so fast. Within 6 hours of Captain Jake Morrison's message reaching home, every major government on the planet had representatives in emergency session. The Global Defense Council chamber buzzed with activity as leaders, who normally spent months arguing over small issues, now worked together with frightening efficiency. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood at the center of it all, coordinating the largest military mobilization in human history. Her staff moved around her like a well-oiled machine, turning plans into reality at a speed that would have impressed wartime commanders from any era. Status report. Sullivan called out to her aide, Colonel Ryan Hayes. All major powers are in. Admiral. The Americans are moving their entire Fourth Fleet. The Europeans are pulling ships from patrol duty across 3 sectors. The Asian Alliance is contributing their newest battle group. Even the Mars colonies are sending everything they have. Hayes paused to check his tablet. Straya says they can have their ships ready in 12 hours. The Canadians are all ready. Moving, Sullivan nodded. It was exactly what she had expected. When humans heard about bullies picking on innocent people, politics became secondary. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Davis was coordinating with the various military branches. She had been in the meeting when the Kithara message first came through official channels. The response had been immediate. No one asked about costs or political implications. The only question was how quickly they could help. Amy, what's our timeline looking like? Sullivan asked. Better than expected, Admiral. The private shipping companies are offering their fastest ships to carry supplies. The mining corporations are providing raw materials at cost. Even the civilian transport companies want to help. Amy's voice carried a note of pride. We'll have the first wave ready to depart in 72 hours. Across the solar system, the mobilization was taking shape. On Luna Base, Commander Luke Bennett was briefing volunteer crews who had signed up faster than they could be processed. The signing stations had lines around the block within hours of the news breaking. Listen up, people. Bennett addressed a room full of pilots, engineers, and soldiers. This isn't going to be easy. We're traveling 40 light years to fight an enemy we know almost nothing about, to save people we've never met. He looked around the room. Anyone who wants to back out can do so now, no questions asked. No one moved. Bennett had expected. As much in the asteroid belt mining station, Alpha 7 was being rapidly converted into a military supply depot. Station Chief Carol Thompson supervised teams working around the clock to load ammunition, medical supplies, and food onto any ship that could carry them. How many ships do we have now? Thompson asked her assistant. Last count was 347, and more arriving every hour. Military vessels, civilian transports, private yachts, cargo haulers. If it can travel between stars, someone's volunteering it for the mission? Thompson shook her head in amazement. Humans could be difficult to organize in peaceful times, but when someone needed help, he moved like a force of nature. Marine Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez was training his unit in zero-gravity combat aboard the UHS Defiance. His Marines were good soldiers, but this would be their first time fighting aliens. Rodriguez had fought in the Titan Rebellion and the Europa conflicts, but those had been against other humans. This was different. Remember, we don't know how strong they are, how fast they move, or what their weapons can do, Rodriguez told his squad. But we know they like picking on people who can't fight back. It tells us everything we need to know about their character. Private First Class Danny Kim raised his hand. Sergeant, what if their technology is way better than ours? Rodriguez smiled grimly. Son, humans have been fighting enemies with better weapons since we figured out how to sharpen sticks. Superior technology just means you have to be smarter and meaner. And trust me, humans wrote the book on being smart and mean when we have to be. Dr. Lisa Turner was working 20-hour days in her laboratory, trying to develop weapons that might work against alien technology. She had samples of materials from crashed alien ships that had been recovered over the years, and she was using them to guess what the hegemony might be using. The good news is that physics works the same way for everyone, she explained to her. Research team. Energy is energy, matter is matter. If their ships can be hit, they can be damaged. If their soldiers have physical bodies, they can be hurt. Her assistant, Dr. Mark Collins, looked up from his computer. Lisa, I've been analyzing the Cathara messages. Their descriptions of hegemony weapons suggest they use some kind of plasma-based system. High energy, but that means high heat signatures. Perfect. Heat signatures mean our targeting systems can track them. Plasma weapons need time to charge between shots. Turner felt a spark of hope. Might actually have advantages they don't expect. While Earth's military prepared for war, the rest of the galaxy watched with growing amazement. The galactic communication networks were full of chatter about the human response. On the trade world of Nexus Prime, alien diplomats gathered in coffee houses and data centers, monitoring human communications with disbelief. They're actually doing it, said Trade Ambassador Vex-9 of the Zinthari Collective. The humans are mobilizing their entire military to help complete strangers. It doesn't make economic sense, replied Cultural Attached Lack of the Marin Federation. The cost of such an operation will be enormous. The political risks are huge, and they have no guarantee of success. Maybe that's not how they think about it, suggested Observer Creelan of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance. Maybe they see it differently than we do. What the aliens were seeing in human communications was something they had never encountered before. While their own governments debated and calculated, humans were acting on pure instinct. Help was needed, so help would be provided. The math was that simple. Captain Ryan Matthews was pushing his destroyer, the UHS Thunder, beyond its safety ratings. His engineers had warned him that running the engines at maximum 4 weeks might cause permanent damage. But Matthews didn't care. Chief, how long can we maintain this speed? He asked his chief engineer. Honestly, Captain, I don't know. These engines weren't designed for this kind of sustained burn. But if we drop power, we'll arrive weeks later than the main fleet. Matthews thought about the Cathara messages they were still receiving. Each one was more desperate than the last. Cities falling, families separated, people hiding in caves while alien hunters searched for them. Keep pushing, Chief. If the engines blow up after we get there, we'll worry about getting home later. Similar conversations were happening on ships throughout the human fleet. Civilian captains were pushing their vessels to the breaking point. Military commanders were accepting risks that would normally be unthinkable. Everyone understood that. Speed mattered more than safety, back on Earth. News networks were covering the mobilization with a mixture of pride and amazement. Reporter Janet Scott stood outside the launch facility at Luna Base, watching as ship after ship departed for the Endara system. This is unprecedented in human history, she told her audience. Never before have we seen such a rapid, unified response to a crisis. Military analysts are calling it the largest deployment since the colonial wars. But this time, we're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting for people we've never met, simply because they ask for help. Cathara were still broadcasting, though their messages were growing weaker as more of their communication stations were destroyed. But they had begun to mention something new in their transmissions: hope. We have received word that help is coming, their latest message said. We do not know who these humans are, or why they would travel so far for strangers, but they say they are coming. We will try to survive until they arrive. Admiral Sullivan was in her command center when that message came through. Around her, staff officers coordinated the movements of hundreds of ships across multiple star systems. The logistics were staggering, but somehow it was all coming together. Admiral reported her aide, the first wave is departing Luna Base. Now, ETA to Endara system is 6 weeks at maximum burn. Sullivan nodded and looked at the tactical display showing the positions of human ships throughout the solar system. In her 40 years of military service, she had never seen anything like this. Humans were capable of remarkable things when they were properly motivated. But as she watched the ships disappear into hyperspace, carrying soldiers toward an unknown enemy in defense of people they had never met, Sullivan realized this was more than remarkable. This was who humans really were when everything else was stripped away. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Endara system and found hell waiting for them. Commander Sam Parker, leading the first wave of fighters from the carrier UHS Valiant, stared at his displays in horror. 3 Cathara. Worlds were burning. Massive alien ships hung over cities like metal vultures, sending down beams of energy that turned buildings into ash. My God, whispered his wingman, Lieutenant Tony Garcia. Look at the size of those ships. The hegemony. Vessels were enormous, each one larger than Earth's biggest space stations. Their dark hulls bristled with weapons, and smaller attack craft swarmed around them like angry insects. But what made Parker's stomach turn was what they were doing to the planet below. They're not just attacking military targets, Parker said into his radio. They're burning everything. Schools, hospitals, homes. Hey, these aren't soldiers, they're murderers. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice crackled through the communication system from her flagship, the UHS Freedom. All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. What you're seeing down there is exactly why we came. Intelligence reports that the hegemony has been doing this for decades across multiple systems. Today it ends. Parker switched his fighter to attack mode and felt his weapons systems come online. Around him, hundreds of other human ships were doing the same. The hegemony had never faced Deathworlders before. They were about to learn the difference. Fighter Wings Alpha through Delta. You're with me, Parker commanded. We're going to clear a path to the surface. Marines will follow behind us to establish landing zones. The human attack began without ceremony or grand speeches. Parkers. Fighters simply accelerated toward the nearest hegemony ship and opened fire. Their first missiles struck the alien vessel's shields, causing brilliant flashes of light. The hegemony ship began to turn toward them, its massive guns swiveling to target the small human fighters. But the humans weren't fighting like the hegemony expected. Instead of maintaining formation and trading shots like civilized opponents, the human fighters scattered and attacked from all directions at once. They came in low, fast, and from angles that seemed impossible. General Crathmore, commanding the hegemony forces, watched the human attack from his flagship bridge. In 50 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like it. The human fighters moved like they were hunting prey, not fighting a battle. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "these humans are not following standard combat patterns. They're attacking our supply ships, our communication arrays, our sensor stations. They're trying to blind us." "Impossible," Crathmore growled. "Civilized species fights like this, they should be trying to engage our main battle fleet in honorable combat." But the humans had no interest in honor. They had seen what the hegemony was doing to the Cathara, and honorable combat was not on their minds. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Davis was leading the first Marine landing on Cathara. Prime surface, or transport ship, the UHS Storm, had fought its way through 3 layers of hegemony fighters to reach the planet. Now she and her Marines were dropping into a burning city to find survivors. "Remember, people," Davis told her soldiers as they prepared to deploy, "our job is to protect civilians first, fight second. These Cathara have been hiding for weeks. You're going to be scared of anyone in combat gear." The Marines hit the ground, running. The city around them was a nightmare of broken buildings and smoking craters. But in the ruins, they could hear voices calling for help. The Cathara were still alive, still hiding, still hoping. Corporal Nina Clark was the first to make contact with Cathara civilians. She found a family of 4 hiding in what had once been a school basement. The Cathara were about the size of humans, but with pale blue skin and large, frightened eyes. The children pressed close to their parents as Nina approached. "It's okay," Nina said, removing her helmet so they could see her face. "We're here too. Help. We came from Earth." The adult Cathara, a female named Sira, looked at Nina with confusion and wonder. "You came from another star to help us. But why?" "We have nothing to offer you." Nina knelt down to the children's level. In simple words, she tried to explain something that seemed natural to her, but impossible to the Cathara. "Because you asked. For help, because someone needed to help you. Because it's the right thing to do." While the Marines established safe zones, the naval battle continued in space above them. Captain Ryan Matthews was pushing his destroyer through a formation of hegemony cruisers, his weapons blazing. The alien ships were larger and more powerful, but they were also slower and less maneuverable. "Chief, give me everything the engines have," Matthews called to his engineering section. "We need to get behind that command ship." "Captain, we're already at 110% power. If we push any harder, we might lose main engines." "Then we'll fight without engines if we have to." The destroyer UHS Thunder shot past 2 hegemony cruisers so fast that their gunners couldn't track it. Matthews brought his ship around behind the alien command vessel and opened fire at point-blank range. His missiles tore through the enemy ship's rear shields and exploded against its hull. But what shocked the hegemony crew more than the damage was what happened next. Instead of pulling back to a safe distance like a rational opponent, the human destroyer stayed close and kept firing. Its captain was willing to risk his ship and crew to make sure his attack succeeded. On the planet's surface, Colonel Rick Stone was setting up a defensive perimeter around the largest group of Cathara survivors they had found, nearly 1,000. Aliens were huddled in an underground shelter system, including many children and elderly. Stone's Marines had to hold this position while transports evacuated the civilians. "Sir, we've got incoming hegemony ground forces," reported Sergeant Mike Rogers. "Looks like a full assault company with armor support." Stone looked at his tactical display. He had 40 Marines against 300 alien soldiers with heavy weapons. In any normal military situation, he would fall back and call for support. But there were 1,000 innocent people behind him who couldn't be moved quickly enough. "We hold here," Stone decided. "Whatever it takes, we hold this line." The hegemony ground assault began 30 minutes later. Their soldiers advanced in perfect formation, using standard tactics that had worked against every other species they had conquered. But the human Marines didn't fight like any enemy they had faced before. Instead of meeting the charge head-on, the Marines used the ruined city as a weapon. They turned every piece of rubble into cover, every broken building into a fortress. They fought from rooftops and basements, from sewers and collapsed tunnels. They made the hegemony pay for every meter of ground. Sergeant Rogers had set up his heavy weapon team in what used to be a children's playground. The contrast was not lost on him as he sighted his launcher on advancing alien tanks. These creatures had been terrorizing families while he and his fellow Marines had families back on Earth. "Target locked," Rogers called out. "Fire for effect," Stone replied. The missile struck the lead hegemony tank and turned it into a ball of fire. But more tanks were coming, and behind them, hundreds of alien soldiers. Back in space, Commander Parker's fighter wing had managed to clear the orbital space around one of the Cathera cities. But the cost had been high. Half of his pilots were gone, their fighters destroyed or damaged beyond repair. The survivors were running low on ammunition and fuel. "All fighters, this is Parker. We need to return to carrier for resupply." "Negative." "Commander," came Admiral Sullivan's voice. "The Cathara are reporting more hegemony ships incoming. We need to keep them off the surface until the evacuation is complete." Parker looked at his fuel gauge and ammunition counter. Out. Both were almost at zero. Around him, his remaining pilots were in the same situation. But below them, human Marines were fighting impossible odds to protect alien civilians they had never met before today. "You heard the Admiral," Parker told his wing. "We stay until the job is done." Dr. Lisa Turner was working in a field medical station that had been set up in a partially destroyed Cathara hospital. She was treating both human and alien wounded, trying to save lives while explosions shook the building around her. A young Cathara male was brought in with severe burns. As Turner worked to stabilize him, he looked up at her with those large, trusting eyes. "Why did you come here?" he asked weakly. "Why would your people die for hours?" Turner paused in her work. It was a question she had been asked a dozen times. That day, by Cathara, who couldn't understand why strangers would risk everything to help them. "'Cause that's what people do," she said simply. "We help each other. We protect each other. Doesn't matter what planet you're from." The battle for the Andara system was far from over, but something had already changed. The hegemony forces, used to conquering terrified populations with overwhelming force, were discovering what happened when they met Deathworlders, who refused to be intimidated. The humans had come 40 light years, not for glory or conquest, because someone had asked for help. And they would keep fighting until every Cathara was safe, no matter what it cost them. The galaxy was watching, and beginning to understand that humans were unlike any species they had encountered before. 3 weeks into the battle for the Andara system, the hegemony was learning that fighting humans was nothing like fighting any other species they had ever encountered. General Crathmore stood on his command ship bridge, staring at tactical displays. That showed something impossible. His forces were losing. "How many ships have we lost in the last 7 days?" he demanded from his tactical officer. 47 vessels destroyed, sir. 18 more severely damaged. The humans keep attacking at night during solar storms in the asteroid fields. They fight in conditions that should force a retreat." Crathmore's claws scratched deep marks. In his command chair, in 50 years of conquest, no species had ever fought like this. The humans treated warfare like they were solving a deadly puzzle, always finding new ways to hurt his forces. Meanwhile, Captain Beth Williams was coordinating the human fleet's unconventional tactics from her cruiser, the UHS Relentless. She had been a military strategist before the war, but fighting the hegemony required thinking in ways no academy had ever taught. "Status report from all battle groups," Williams called out to her communications officer. Battle Group Alpha reports. "Successful raid on Hegemony Supply Depot in Sector 7. Battle Group Beta destroyed 2 enemy cruisers using the moon's gravity to slingshot around for surprise attacks. Battle Group Charlie is currently hiding in the planet's rings, waiting for the next Hegemony patrol." Williams smiled grimly. The hegemony expected civilized warfare with clear rules and honorable engagements. Instead, they were getting the kind of fighting that humans had perfected on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Lieutenant Alex Chen had turned the war into an engineering problem. His technical teams were scattered across the Cathara worlds, turning civilian equipment into weapons and building fortifications out of whatever materials they could find. "Sir, we've finished converting the mining equipment on Settlement 12, reported his assistant, Corporal Janet Kim. "The industrial lasers can now target hegemony air vehicles. The ore haulers have been armored and turned into mobile weapons platforms." Chen nodded as he looked over the construction plans. "Good work. What about the communications array?" "We've boosted the signal strength by 400%. Now when the Cathara send messages asking for help, every species in 3 sectors, we'll hear them loud and clear." That had been Chen's idea. The hegemony relied on their victims being isolated and forgotten. But the humans were making sure the galaxy could see exactly what was happening in the Indara system. On the planet's surface, Sergeant Dan Murphy had become a legend among both human and Cathara forces. His sniper team had been picking off hegemony, commanders with precision that bordered on supernatural. But Murphy wasn't just killing enemies, he was sending a message. "Range to target?" Murphy asked his spotter, Private Lisa Wong. 800 meters. Wind is calm. Target is the hegemony field commander who's been directing attacks on civilian shelters. Murphy adjusted his scope and took a deep breath. Through the crosshairs, he could see the alien officer pointing at a map, probably planning another assault on innocent people. The shot was clean and final. "Confirmed kill," Wong reported. "That's the 6th field commander this week." It's the psychological effect on hegemony forces was becoming obvious. Their officers were becoming afraid to show themselves. Some were refusing direct command of ground operations. An enemy they couldn't see was picking them off one by one. It was making their soldiers nervous. Meanwhile, Major Kelly Price was leading night raids that were becoming the stuff of nightmares for hegemony troops. Her special operations team moved like ghosts through the darkness, striking at supply convoys and communication stations before disappearing back into the night. Target acquired, Price whispered into her radio as her team crept toward a hegemony ammunition depot. 6 guards, automated defenses are active. Her soldiers moved with the kind of coordination that only came from years of training on a world where a single mistake could be fatal. They had grown up knowing that predators hunted at night, so they had learned to become the predators. The attack was over in 3 minutes. The depot exploded in a fireball that could be seen from orbit, taking with it enough ammunition to supply a full hegemony division for a month. By the time enemy reinforcements arrived, Price's team was already miles away. But the turning point of the war came when Commander Steve Ross attempted something that military historians would later call either brilliant or insane. His destroyer, the UHS Fury, was badly damaged and outnumbered by 3 hegemony cruisers. Instead of retreating, Ross decided to capture one of the enemy ships. "All hands, prepare for boarding action," Ross announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going to take that command cruiser." His crew looked at him like he had lost his mind. Boarding actions against ships 10 times their size were supposed to be impossible. But Ross had been studying hegemony tactics for weeks, and he had noticed something important. "Their ships are designed for long-range combat," he explained to his officers. "All their weapons point outward. If we can get inside their defensive perimeter, they can't shoot at us without hitting themselves." The UHS Fury accelerated directly toward the largest hegemony cruiser, taking massive damage as it closed the distance. Ross's ship was falling apart around him, but he kept pushing forward until they were close enough to launch boarding pods. "Marines, you're up," Ross called to the assault team led by Lieutenant Kevin Brooks. "Take that ship." The boarding action was brutal in close quarters, the kind of fighting humans had been perfecting since they first picked up clubs in prehistoric caves. The hegemony crew, trained for civilized warfare, found themselves facing soldiers who treated every corridor like a hunting ground. Within 2 hours, Brooks and his Marines had fought their way to the enemy bridge. The hegemony captain, a massive creature covered in natural armor, towered over the human soldiers, but surrendered when he realized that these small aliens were willing to die to complete their mission. "I yield," the captain said in broken English. "Your species fights like ... like wild beasts." Brooks removed his helmet and looked the alien in the eye. "No, sir. Wild beasts fight for food and territory. We fight for our family. And we just adopted about 10 million Cathera into that family. Capture of the Hegemony command ship provided the humans with intelligence that changed everything. Dr. Aaron Mitchell, working as both medic and intelligence analyst, spent hours going through the alien computer systems. Admiral Sullivan needs to see this immediately, Mitchell told his communication operator. The data he had found was staggering. Admiral Sullivan reviewed Mitchell's report from her flagship. The Hegemony wasn't just attacking the Cathara. They were part of a massive slave-trading operation that had been going on for decades. Dozens of peaceful species had been conquered, and their populations sold to other alien civilizations. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," Sullivan ordered. "Patch me through to every human ship in the fleet. All hands need to hear this." When Sullivan's message went out, the response was immediate and frightening. The humans had come to save the Cathara, but now they knew they were fighting something much larger and more evil than they had imagined. Captain Matthews, still pushing his destroyer beyond safe limits, felt his anger turn cold and focused when he heard the Admiral's report. Around him, his crew was having the same reaction. They weren't just fighting to save one species anymore. They were fighting to stop a cancer that had been spreading across the galaxy for years. "Communications, send a message to all Hegemony forces in this system," Matthews ordered. "What should the message say, Captain?" Matthews thought for a moment. "Tell them that the humans have seen enough. Tell them they can surrender now, or they can find out what happens when Deathworlders stop playing by civilized rules." The message was broadcast on all frequencies in multiple languages. Across the Andara system, Hegemony commanders received the same simple ultimatum. Some of them, looking at their tactical displays, showing how much damage the humans had already done, began to consider options they had never thought about before. General Crathmore received the human message on his flagship bridge. Around him, his officers waited for orders that he was no longer sure how to give. In 3 weeks, these humans had torn apart his invasion force and turned his conquered territory into a battlefield. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving requests for evacuation from 12 different ground commanders. They're saying their positions are being overrun." Crathmore looked at the tactical display one more time. Red symbols showing destroyed Hegemony units covered the screen. The humans had not just fought back, they had turned the war around completely, for the first time in 50 years of conquest. Crathmore began to consider the possibility of retreat, but he was also beginning to understand that the humans might not let him leave alive. He'd seen the reports of what his forces had done too. Cathera civilians, these Deathworlders, took that kind of thing very personally indeed. The war for the Andara system ended not with a great battle, but with a simple choice. General Crathmore stood on his flagship bridge, watching his fleet fall apart around him. In 6 weeks of fighting, the humans had destroyed over half of his forces and turned the rest into a frightened, demoralized mob. "Sir, the humans are requesting a meeting," his communications officer reported. "They say they want to discuss terms." Crathmore's claws clicked against his command chair. In 50 years of conquest, he had never been asked to surrender. Idea felt strange and humiliating. But looking at his tactical displays, he knew he had only 2 choices: surrender or die. "Tell them I will meet with their commander." The meeting took place on the surface of Cathara Prime, in the ruins of what had once been the planet's capital city. Admiral Kate Sullivan arrived with a small escort of Marines, while Crathmore brought twice as many guards. But both leaders knew that the number of soldiers present didn't matter anymore. "General Crathmore," Sullivan said, as they faced each other across a makeshift table, "you have something that belongs to the people of this system. We want it back." "What is that?" Crathmore asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Freedom. Safety. The right to live without fear." Sullivan's voice was calm but hard as steel. "You took those things away. We're here to give them back." Crathmore looked around at the destroyed city. In the distance, he could see human soldiers working alongside Cathara civilians to clear rubble and set up temporary shelters. The humans weren't treating the aliens like conquered subjects or grateful clients. They were treating them like family. "Are your terms," he asked finally, "complete withdrawal from this system, immediate release of all prisoners and slaves. Full reparations for the damage you've caused. Sullivan paused. And information about your other operations. We know this isn't the only place you've done this. The general's eyes widened. You would demand information about our entire organization? That would be the end of your slave trading business. Yes. Sullivan leaned forward. General, you made one very important mistake. You asked for help from the galaxy, and humans heard you. We don't like bullies. We really don't like slavers. We absolutely hate people who hurt children. Crathmore signed the surrender agreement 3 hours later. As his ships prepared to leave the Indara system, he watched human vessels moving. In the opposite direction, more ships were arriving every day, bringing supplies, medical equipment, engineers to help rebuild what had been destroyed. But the humans weren't the only ones coming to help anymore. Word of what had happened in the Indara system was spreading across the galaxy, and other species were beginning to arrive. Some came out of guilt for not helping earlier. Others came because they had been inspired by the human example. Captain Jake Morrison, whose ship had first received the Cathara distress call, was now coordinating refugee operations on the planet's largest moon. Thousands of Cathara who had been hiding in caves and ruins were finally safe, and more were being found. Every day, Captain called out his communications officer, Linda Hayes. We're getting another message. This one's from the Zalani Republic. They're asking if we need help with the reconstruction efforts. Morrison smiled. Tell them yes. Tell them we can use all the help we can get. Over the following weeks, the Indara system became something unprecedented in galactic history. Cooperative reconstruction effort involving dozens of different species. The humans had shown that it was possible to stand up to the hegemony. And other civilizations were finally willing to help. Dr. Lisa Turner was working in the new hospital that had been built in record time through the combined efforts of human engineers and alien architects. She was training Cathara medical students in trauma surgery, skills they had never needed before the invasion, but would unfortunately need in the future. Dr. Turner said her newest student, a young Cathara named Veth, "Why did your people come so far to help us? We had nothing to offer in return." Turner had heard this question many times over the past few months. The Cathara still couldn't understand why strangers would risk their lives for people they had never met. That's what neighbors do, Turner explained. When your neighbor's house is on fire, you don't ask what they can pay you. You grab a bucket and help put out the fire. We're not your neighbors. We live 40 light years away. Turner smiled. Beth, humans have learned that in a galaxy this dangerous, everyone is your neighbor. Distance doesn't matter when someone needs help. Colonel Rick Stone was training young Cathara in basic self-defense. It's not to make them warriors, but to ensure they would never again be completely helpless. The classes were voluntary, but hundreds of Cathara had signed up. Remember, Stone told his students, the goal isn't to win fights. The goal is to survive long enough for help to arrive. And now you know that help will come. One of his students, an elderly Cathara named Joran, raised his hand. Colonel Stone, what if the hegemony comes back? What if they bring more ships? Stone looked around at the mixed group of humans and aliens working together throughout the training facility. Then they'll face not just humans, but everyone we've been training and working with. The galaxy is different now, Joran. People are waking up. Ambassador Helen Foster was addressing the Galactic Council, an assembly of representatives from hundreds of different species. The chamber was packed with more delegates present than had attended any session in decades. The events in the Indara system have shown us something important, Foster told the assembly. For too long, we've all assumed that problems like the hegemony were someone else's responsibility. We've all assumed that smaller, peaceful species were acceptable casualties in the pursuit of stability. She paused to let her words sink in. Humans have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We've all been doing nothing for too long. The audience representatives from dozens of species shifted uncomfortably. Foster was right, and they all knew it. But the good news is that it's not too late to change. The hegemony's surrender in the Indara system was just the beginning. We have the locations of their other operations, and we have proof of their crimes. The question now is, what are we going to do about it? The debate that followed lasted for 3 days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. One by one, species that had remained neutral for decades began volunteering ships and resources for what would become known as the liberation campaigns. Sergeant Tony Garcia was teaching a group of Kithara children how to play basketball in the courtyard of a rebuilt school. The children laughed and shouted as they tried to shoot the ball through the hoop, and Garcia couldn't help but smile at their joy. Sergeant Garcia called out one of the children, a girl named Kira. "Will you stay here forever?" Garcia knelt down to her level. "I can't stay forever, Kira. I have my own family back on Earth. But some of my friends will stay, and will always come back if you need help. Promise. I promise." And humans never break promises to family. Captain Matt Rodriguez was preparing to depart with the last of the military transports, but many humans had chosen to stay behind. Engineers, doctors, teachers, and farmers had volunteered to help the Kithara rebuild their civilization. Some had even started families with local partners. "It's remarkable," Rodriguez told his first officer as they watched the mixed human Kithara crews working on the docks below. "We came here to fight a war, and we ended up building a new kind of society." The memorial service was held on the first anniversary of the liberation. Representatives from 47 different species attended, along with thousands of humans and Kithara. The memorial itself was simple, a black stone wall with the names of everyone who had died in the fighting. Both human and alien. Elder Zethrin, the oldest surviving member of the Kithara Council, spoke for his people. "Before the humans came, we thought we were alone in a hostile galaxy. Thought no one cared what happened to small, peaceful people like us." He paused to look at the crowd of different species gathered before him. "We learned that we were wrong. We learned that the galaxy is full of people who care, who will help, who will stand up to bullies and protect the innocent. We learned that distance doesn't matter when family is in trouble." The inscription on the memorial was written in 12 different languages, but the message was the same in all of them. They came because someone had to. As the ceremony ended and people began to leave, a small group remained behind. They were mostly humans, but there were also Kithara, Zilani, Morans, and members of other species who had participated in the liberation campaigns. They called themselves the Guardians, and they had made a simple pledge to ensure that what happened to the Kithara would never happen to anyone else. They would watch for distress calls, respond to cries for help, and remind the galaxy that some things were more important than politics or profit. The call had gone out to all the civilized species of the galaxy, but only the Deathworlders had answered. Well, thanks to their example, the galaxy itself was becoming a little less civilized and a lot more human. And that, everyone agreed, was a good thing.